Hello, everybody. Welcome to 3-Point Perspective, the podcast about illustration, how to do it, how to make a living at it, and how to make an impact in the world with your art. I'm Jake Parker.
I'm Lee White.
And I'm Will Terry. And all three of us are professional illustrators. We've all worked for all the major publishers in the business. Together, we published somewhere around 75 children's books. And we've all taught illustration at university art schools.
That's right. Each week we come at you guys with fantastic illustrator interviews or questions from people just like you. Sometimes we agree, sometimes we argue, but each time you learn something brand spanking new.
Brand spanking new. Today, we have James Gurney visiting us in the 3-Point Perspective studios here. Actually,
he's an old friend of ours.
Yeah,
we hang out with him quite a bit.
He's, he doesn't need an introduction, but if you don't know who he is, he's the creator of Dinotopia, the Dinotopia book series, millions of books in circulation. He is a National Geographic illustrator, book cover illustrator. And the reason he's joining us today is he just recently came out with a book called The Artist's Guide to Sketching, which is actually a reprint from a book he published 40 years ago as a young 20-something. And we'll jump right into the story about how that book came about. But it's now been remastered, it's been expanded, and it's I would call it it's a rally cry to this generation about going outside, experiencing life, and recording it in your sketchbook. And so do check that out. And let's jump into the interview. Let's get into what you're doing here, James.
Okay.
You have a book that just came out. It's reissued or re-released or reprinted. I don't know what the exact term is, but do you want to give us the elevator pitch for The Artist's Guide to Sketching?
Okay. Yeah. The Artist's Guide to Sketching is a book about on-the-spot drawing that came out in 1982, co-authored by, of all people, Thomas Kincaid, who people know as the painter of light. But before he was a painter of light, he was a very different artist. And when I knew him, he was a different guy. Mm-hmm. Back then, he was painting and sketching everything under the sun, especially gritty urban scapes and down and out people and stuff like that. This is before he discovered the glowing cottages and all that. Mm-hmm. And he and I were both students at Art Center in Pasadena, but we got sick of all the marker fumes and the art theories and windowless classrooms. So we decided, let's drop out of art school. Let's ride the freight trains across America, and let's write a book about it. It's just an insane idea. The other backup idea was to build a raft and float down the Mississippi River and do like Jack Kerouac or John Steinbeck and just kind of write about our adventures. So we got to New York City. We did sketches of people's portraits in bars to earn money. So we were doing making a little money here. We were flat broke, sleeping on rooftops, sleeping in graveyards, interviewing lumberjacks and gravestone cutters. It was just a wild adventure. And when we got to New York, we pitched this idea to a publisher. Hey, we got this idea for a book. And they just thought we were crazy because we were wearing matching uniform shirts that said Jim and Tom. We had short haircuts. But eventually they went along with this idea. We came back home to LA where we were living, finally got a contract. And of course, we just signed it immediately without even reading. I know you guys did a podcast about contracts. Well, we didn't even read it. We just signed it. We were so happy. We didn't make a nickel on this project. We were still broke, so we got a job painting backgrounds for animation, which is another whole story.
I love the quote from, who were you doing the animation for? Ralph
Bakshi.
Ralph Bakshi, and his quote for the book was, or his blurb was something like, at least these guys are painting backgrounds for me. I don't care what they do on the side.
Yeah.
So something like that. I just murdered it, but
Ralph was great because he was a very unconventional director and still an unconventional guy. He was the one guy fighting for animation as an adult art medium. Mm-hmm. Art form back in 1983, which is like the dark ages of animation for Disney and everybody else. But Bakshi was doing Fire and Ice with Frank Frazetta, and Tom and I we were looking for a job. I tried at Disney, I got turned down. I even got a call from Eric Larson who said, I looked at your portfolio and you're doing like copies of Muybridge. We don't really look at photos that closely. You should do stuff that's a little, I said, oh, geez, I had the wrong stuff in my portfolio. Okay. So I went to Bluth, didn't get work there. Then went to Bakshi. I just walked in the front door. There's no receptionist or secretary. I just wandered into the back of the place. And there was this guy, this rough looking guy. And he said, why are you guys wearing suits? We said, well, we want a job. We want to paint backgrounds for the movie. And he said, okay, well, show me what you got. So we showed him our portfolios. So he said, you hired. So right on the spot. So, okay. So, but we need to hire like 4 more guys to make a background department. We need like 6 guys to make backgrounds for the whole feature. We said, we can paint them all. He said, you guys, 2 guys? We said, yeah, no problem. We'll paint them for you. 1,200 paintings.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
So I didn't know how to paint either. So I get there the first day and I get handed this assignment to paint dead bodies on a battlefield. And it came out horrible. I mean, I was just bombing out. Tom got at least to paint jungle scenes. But my stuff was so bad that I got fired at the end of that day. And Bakshi said, he told Tom to tell me, don't bother coming back on Monday for the weekend. So I went home and I learned to paint on a Friday. And I painted this I just got lucky. I painted this really nice mountain scene, kind of an Andes mountain panorama. And I said to Tom, bring this in and tell him, make up another name of another guy, another friend of yours that can fill in for you to take my place. And so he did. He brought this painting in and Bakshi looked at it and said, who's this guy? And he made up a name. He'd tell me he's hired. So I come in the next day with a mustache and a pair of glasses, a different hat.
Like a Seinfeld
Aren't you the
episode.
guy I just fired on Friday? I said, yeah, I'm the same guy, but I learned to paint over the weekend. He said, okay, I'll give you another try. So I managed to get it working, and you can kind of see the learning curve if you watch the movie, but it was a great experience to learn to paint on a background assignment for the movie, because I had to paint like 11 paintings a week. I mean, it was really a lot.
It was gouache.
As you know, yeah, these were cartoon color. So it's cell vinyl acrylic.
Gotcha.
So the pressure on you that day when you came back must have been enormous, because that next painting, they were probably looking at very closely.
Oh yeah, and he would be happy to fire me if it didn't work out. We were kind of the loose cannons in this studio, which was already kind of an oddly run, loosely run kind of outfit, because we were always doing gags on the other animators.
I don't want to gloss over that you learned to paint in a weekend. What did you actually like do in that weekend? Were you just 24/7? Like I got to figure this out. Like, did you ask Tom to be like, hey, can you just give me a tutorial here? Like, how did you pick it up?
Well,
quickly?
I had learned a fair amount about drawing and value before that. So I was pretty comfortable with the idea of light and shade and value. And then all it is just light and shade and value with color and with a liquid medium. So Tom helped guide me. At the time, he was a really wild painter. Just start in with a brush and cover the surface of the canvas wildly, and then go down to little fine details. But I think painting isn't really not that hard. It's thinking that's hard. Painting is easy. Thinking is hard, is what I always say.
I agree with that.
But trying to figure out what to do for a given job is also challenging, And so the neat thing about doing animation backgrounds, as you know, Jake, because you've worked in animation too, is that when you see the dailies, you go in there and all of a sudden you're inside your paintings, because you're moving around through spaces you've painted. You're seeing things from different angles. You're swinging. People are swinging off vines. Characters are moving through the space you painted. So you feel like you're inside the painting, which is always what I read about. Howard Pyle always told his students, Howard Pyle, the great father of American illustration, he always said, jump through the picture plane, live inside your picture. And I think that's really important to do, to pretend you're part of the inside of that scene.
Yeah. You so you did about 11 paintings a week is what you're doing? So like 2 a day, essentially.
I mean, some of them were quick, like
Yeah.
blur pan shots or quick, but some of them were establishing shots we'd have to spend 2 or 3 days on.
So I had a project similar to that, a freelance project that I did where I essentially like for an entire year, they didn't care about the quality of the art. They just needed ideas. And so they said, we just need like 10 ideas every week. And next time we meet, we just want to see sketched out ideas. And what I found over that year span is by the end of the year, I was able to draw better and faster than when I started it, just from the sheer amount of like not worrying about quality, but just worrying about quantity. I'm curious if that was like kind of the same thing that happened to you.
Absolutely.
With the painting.
The more quantity you have to do, the better the quality gets, just because you're forced to make decisions under pressure and you're not allowed to fail. You're not allowed to screw up. We only screwed up 1 or 2 backgrounds in all that time because, well, we're working in opaque, so you can fix mistakes pretty easily with opaques. But I think a lot of art students nowadays get this idea, and this is an unpopular opinion I'm about to express, but I really believe it. That is that people are told you got to fail a whole lot before you can succeed. And I kind of disagree with that. I think what you need to do when you're learning something new, like painting if you've never painted before, or sculpting if you've never done that before, is to set up your work practice so that you have an experimental test area to try out, like you try out a glue, to try out the glue, see how it works in a bunch of test samples, so that you don't build the whole thing and then have it fail. Failure is bad, and you don't want to fail. And the only way to really succeed is to experiment, test, and try stuff out. My last name is Gurney, and one of my relatives was Dan Gurney, the race car driver and builder, who built a lot of Formula One race cars. I asked him about this idea that you need to fail a lot, and I said, "What do you think about that advice?" He says, "In my business," he says, "not good advice. A failure in race car driving is fatal usually. So you don't want to fail. You have to know your limits of what you can get away with, and what's how fast you can go under different circumstances." So anyway, that's sort of, I come from a long line of mechanical engineers. My dad was, grandfather, great-grandfather, and they always would test stuff out. If they had some new technology or some new material, they'd want to try it out, bend it, break it, play with it.
Yeah.
One time my dad came back with a gallon of pure nitric acid from work. He said, "Here, you can play with this and try it out." I said, "What does it do?" So he dropped a penny in the top of the bottle of nitric acid, and it just dissolved into a bunch of bubbles. And I read up on this. I said, "This is what they use for etching." So I had to learn how to ground a plate, how to put the plate in there, how to create an etching. And my dad trusted me to play with this and experiment. Wow. But he said, "Be careful, don't drink it or anything like that."
Yeah. Keep it out of your eyes.
Yeah.
So you went from painting backgrounds. What'd you do when the picture was over? What was next?
Well, I was unemployed after that, but I was also working full tilt on the book, Artist Guide to Sketching. But at the same time, I thought I'd be getting a job at Disney as I mentioned, when I started at Bakshi. And when I finished up at Bakshi, I got a call from Joe Hale, who was in charge of the layouts at Disney, or involved with that. And they were working on Black Cauldron, and he offered me a really nice job there. They had interesting ideas and looked like an intriguing opportunity. But at that point, I had met Frank Frazetta, who was doing paperback covers and freelance illustration. They never mentioned paperback covers at art school, but that looked like a good direction to take. Of course, all the clients were in New York City, and I was in LA. But it was okay to work by mail. So I did some samples, one of a sea monster, one of a asteroid miner, kind of a spaceman. Yeah. And just a few different samples. But I printed those out as 5x7 prints, mailed them to the art directors. I got a list of art directors from the Black Book, I think it was, and got a job, just one job, but enough to give me a tear sheet. And I sent that tear sheet around. Eventually, one job built on another, and then I got enough to keep me going mostly through the 80s, working for paperback covers and National Geographic. It was another dream client.
I bet. Yeah,
That's
your
awesome.
National Geographic stuff, I absolutely love. Which I assume, from my understanding, that's what fed into Dinotopia.
Very much so. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, before we dive into that, I just have one little side question.
Sure.
Did you maintain that the friendship with Thomas Kincaid? Did you guys career parallel each other for a little while before he started doing the cottages, or
Yeah.
how did that go?
Yeah. Well, we were friends all the way through till he passed. But of course, I lived on the East Coast. He lived on the West Coast. And he kind of had walls around himself a little bit. You know, it was hard to know what he was thinking or feeling. We didn't talk business or money or anything like that. We just talked art, painting. And we would occasionally get together, like every few years. Our families would get together to go on painting trips, sketching trips, and that was fun. But Tom was always a wild character. I mean, a kind of a guy who you'd never know what he'd say or do next.
Mhm.
So it got a little bit crazy sometimes later on to go in public with him because he would just do crazy stuff.
I read Billion Dollar Painter, his biography. I don't know if you read that book.
I
or
read
not.
some of it, but it didn't seem too accurate to me, so I just skipped it. But what
Okay.
did you take away from it?
He's a complicated guy, but for the most part, I think his life would have been all right if he didn't have a drinking problem.
Yeah.
You know, like that essentially drove him off the rails, and he never was able to like recover from it.
Yeah, I think he didn't have a dad and he grew up really poor. And to him, it was very important to sell stuff to get validated.
Yeah.
And at the same time, he was very successful at doing that because he was a natural born salesman. He came up with the idea of like the remarked prints, you know, the touched up prints and the galleries with the spotlights they could dial up and down. And he was good at selling stuff, but at the same time, he wanted to be accepted by the art world. And that was a conflict going on in his mind. I think that was kind of hard to resolve. He wanted to be in museums. He wanted to have a museum show. He wanted the art critics to like him, wanted other artists to like him. And that was hard for him to have both of those at the same time. So but the drinking was a problem for sure.
I think my other big takeaway from there too was like success sort of like success begets more success, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, he started out, he was doing the sort of plein air paintings and selling them, the ocean scenes and whatnot. And it was the art dealer that saw him and was like, wait, there's something here. And his ability to like utilize people around him who could fill in his gaps was like, I think kind of an interesting thing where, and I don't want to talk about him too much. This is a James Gurney interview, but he was really good at like leveraging other people's strengths to kind of build this overall brand.
Yeah, he liked having a company beneath him.
Yeah.
That's a lot of responsibility when you're the one guy generating content for this whole company to survive on.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, he was a complicated guy, but when I knew him, he was a very ambitious and very focused and intense painting buddy. And I really learned a lot about painting from him. And he also, I think he lent me a certain boldness that I wouldn't have had otherwise. And that's a good thing. I mean, sometimes you have a friendship that is a complementary strengths to your own strengths, hopefully. And we definitely were that for each other. I mean, we were riding freight trains, which is very dangerous. Because what you have to do, we met this hobo named Bud in the LA freight yards. And we said, how do you ride the freights? And he said, well, you got to wait till they're leaving the yard at yard speed, which is like 5 miles an hour, but then they speed up. So when they're going yard speed, you don't want to be in the yard because the bulls will chase you out. The bulls are the guards, or the security guys. That chase
and they're
you out of the
brutal.
yard. Yeah, they're brutal. You don't want to. And so you choose your car, you throw your backpack on, and you run and you jump on the ladder and get on. And then at nighttime, they're scary because there's no lights on them. They're pitch dark. They're really big and powerful. And the main thing is you don't know where they're going or where they're going to be set out or stopped. So when you hop on one, you kind of generally know it's heading east, but you don't know if it's going southeast or northeast. So you don't know your destination. You don't know where you're going to end up.
Yeah, you don't know if it's Santa Fe or Denver.
Awesome.
Just like life, right?
Yeah.
Like life, we don't know where we're going to end up usually.
Mm-hmm.
Lee's getting ideas. He's like,
I'm going right when this podcast is over. I'm jumping on a train.
Yeah, I don't really
Is that
recommend
still
it.
possible?
We rode the box cars at first because they would leave the doors open a little bit, so you could hop on the box car. But we were always afraid that the door would swing shut and lock us in because we heard of that happening. Then we thought we sat in a gondola, but then a guy in the caboose told us, don't want to ride the gondola because if they have a load of lumber or something and it shifts weight, because freight trains jerk to a stop, and they do this in order to compress the spring tension on the couplers, so that when they come to a stop, they have that spring advantage when they're starting up again. So they're dangerous if you want to try to jump from the top of one boxcar to another. You have to be real careful that shock wave isn't passing back through the train.
Wow.
Stuff like that. So they're crazy. You get covered head to toe with black grime, no matter what you do.
That's incredible. So how long did that trip take overall?
It was like 6 weeks. It wasn't that long. We hitchhiked part of the way. We, at the very last leg of the train or the trip, we had to take by vehicle because we got kicked off the train for flying a kite off the top of this 3-level auto carrier. We strapped together a bunch of bootlaces and made a kite because it's a very steady wind. But the guys in the caboose saw it and they radioed ahead to the Conrail police, and they kicked us off. Fortunately, though, we had a newspaper article that we had gotten one in Flagstaff and one in Yuma and one in Nashville. We showed them that, and they said, "Okay, well, we won't throw you in jail. We'll let you go at the nearest on-ramp." The nearest on-ramp was near this auto drive-away company where you'd get to drive a vehicle for just paying for the gas. The vehicle they gave us was a Conrail maintenance truck with the train wheels on the front that would lower down.
Oh, yeah. That's awesome.
So we could have driven on the tracks, which would have been suicide, of course.
Right.
But it did have a light on the top and a siren and a spotlight that we could use to like pull people over. So that was fun.
Wow.
And you were like, what, early 20s? It was like 20, 22,
21, 22.
21. That's incredible.
And you're just doing sketchbook stuff on that trip?
Sketching everything. Yeah, we went to the Missouri State Fox Hunting Championship, which we heard about when we were in the Donovan, Missouri, what they call the Sin Center, which is really their snooker hall. They play snooker there. But there was this row of trophies. We said, whose trophies are those? Oh, those are Ernie Caldwell's. He'll be coming in later today. This 90-something-year-old guy, great old character. He said, "Yeah, that one was won by High Boy. That one's won by High Girl." And I said, "Well, what is this? What is this state fox hunting thing? Well, it's coming up this weekend. You guys should go." So he took us out in his pickup truck, along with the dogs in the back of the pickup truck, to this amazing event held in the countryside, where they built these pens for the dogs. And so we said, let's draw portraits of the dogs. Like we do portraits in bars, we'll do portraits of the dogs. $2 each, we said. So these guys would come over with their dogs, they'd pose them out for us. But they were tough critics. They didn't like the way we drew them at all. The back had to be a certain way, the tail had to be a certain way, the markings had to be just right, or else they wouldn't pay us the $2 even.
Everybody's an art director.
Tougher crit than we ever got from an art director or from an art teacher. But that was a good thing. To see your work through the eyes of non-artists is really helpful to anyone.
So you said you come from a long line of engineers, and that makes sense knowing the way that you work and the material that you have produced, like the illustrations you produce. But was there ever any pushback in your family about you being like, well, I want to be an artist, I don't want to go into engineering?
Yeah, I did want to go straight to art school. I grew up in Palo Alto, California. I wanted to go to art school in San Francisco. But my parents suggested, they didn't push it too hard, but they said, you might want to take this first 4 years and go to a liberal arts college and study a little of everything, because you can always specialize later, but you can't get that broad exposure to the world of knowledge and academia later on in life as easily. So I went to, and I thought that was good advice. I went to UC Berkeley. I majored in anthropology, a lot of focus on archaeology, which I loved. got to go on a couple archaeology digs, a paleontology dig, studied astronomy and English, all these different topics. Then I went to art school and realized art school wasn't going to teach the stuff I wanted to learn, like animation or children's book illustration or cartooning. They didn't teach that at all. All they taught was editorial illustration, which didn't interest me that much. So that's when I dropped out, and Tom and I dropped out and decided to teach ourselves. And I'm a real believer in self-teaching, but to teach yourself anything, you have to, take notes. I think any student should set their own curriculum too.
Yeah.
And why don't you guys tell me about SVSLEARN? Because I don't know. I see that associated with your podcast, but tell me what that is.
We started out with just building a class or two here and class or two there, just stuff that we were already doing. And so just like, oh, hey, take this basic illustration class online. And then,
well, let me interject really quick. You just said you wanted to learn how to do children's books, how to do animation, whatnot. And Will and I, and myself also, I wanted to teach people how to draw comics. Will and I had a children's book course we wanted to teach, and there wasn't a way to get those classes up and running in the universities that we were working at. And so that was really what started it. And then it turned into, like Lee was saying, an illustration class here, a specific thing there. But go ahead, Lee.
Yeah, so we started out, and then we just kept going with adding classes to this sort of ever-growing wall of instruction, and that worked okay. But what we really wanted to do is be a viable alternative to art school, because the school I was a full-time teacher at the college level, and those kids were ending up $150,000 in debt. And like Jake said, I couldn't get the classes, as techniques changed and as industry changed, I couldn't get that stuff through because it would be a 3-year waiting period to change a class or to get a new class in the curriculum. So we just, once we had this big wall of classes, we realized we need to curate this in some way. And so the current version of SVS is just a highly curated, very functional class by class building step. It's like, I think it's 22 classes that then is supported by an online community, because that was the missing component of online education.
Yeah.
Everybody, I've got probably 10 videos from fantastic artists online that I haven't even done the assignment because there's no support for me doing it. I watch it and I learn from it a little bit, but we realized people like interaction. And so we built this community that then supports this foundation. And we can change it at any time if the industries change, or we're running different workshops and things like that, trying to supplement different areas. So it's become just an absolute blast, and we support it with live events, including like live podcasts and stuff like that.
So is it videos with assignments and community interaction?
Yeah,
that's right.
Critiques too.
That's actually what frustrated me when I was teaching at university was you'd make this lecture. And some days you wouldn't do it so great, and other days you'd just do, knock it out of the park. But it would evaporate after you did it. And being able to lay it down and take advantage of technology and putting it on video and really spending your time doing the best lecture you could do, now it can live forever, basically.
Right. And we have different tiers based on what people want. But at our highest tier, we have a massive amount of teacher involvement in this online thing. So it's kind of a combination. It's really cool between watching the videos and then us supporting the students while they're going through this thing. They can ask questions. We have a 24/7 hotline where if somebody says, hey, I can't figure out the perspective for this drawing, we step in and do a draw over or whatever. So it's cool. I mean, in my opinion, it's what art education should have been the whole time.
Yeah, it sounds like what you guys are offering is really what any student needs, because you can't really watch videos to learn to paint. I mean, you can pick up tips here and there. But what I liked about art school, I'm not down on art school because I think art school can be great. What's good about it is that not just what the teacher gives you, but what you get from the other students, both friendly competition or critiques or just seeing how other people approach a problem is really helpful.
Well, that's why I went to Art Center too. So I graduated from Art Center, and some of my teachers were barely there, but the students, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I was reading that in your book, and you mentioned it in the podcast that you guys just decided to leave and go off on your own. How did you have the confidence to know that you had enough
That's a good
to
question.
leave school and that you weren't missing some key things that you were going to need later on?
Well, our heroes were old artists. I mean, from long ago, like Norman Rockwell, or even older, like Adolf Menzel or John Singer Sargent. It was hard to find stuff about these guys back then in the 80s. So we'd haunt old bookstores. Norman Rockwell was one of the instructors in the famous artist school, and somehow we picked up this idea that was a good source for education. So we found the binders of the famous artist course. We found Andrew Loomis, which was also hard to find back then, and those guys are well known now. But we realized there's a body of knowledge here, like for multi-figure compositions, that just they're not teaching in the art schools. Maybe they're teaching it now. I don't know. But to us, it seemed like we just had to figure all this out for ourselves, which is what we did. That's really what the Artist's Guide to Sketching is. It's just our journey through teaching to learn stuff.
But then you also you've put out Imaginative Realism, Painting Color and Light. Like, those books are incredible as far as how you break down, like, step by step. Like, just the Painting Color and Light book, I always go back to that and I'm like, oh, I want to see how he does bounce light, or how he does occlusion, or stuff like that. All of that stuff, is that just you self-taught, picking it up over the years, learning from experience and from other artists, or?
Well,
or,
I keep
or what?
a study book, and I always have since the early days. And the study book is just my notes from my reading, my discoveries, my trying stuff out, my experimenting. But when I came out with the fourth Dinotopia book, which is called Journey to Chandara, my publisher, which is Andrews McNeil, the publicist said, you really should start a blog. This is like 2006 or something like that. I wasn't really sure what a blog was. We didn't have internet at home until 2012. So I would do this at the library. So I would just basically download my notebooks and my thoughts about light and color and what I learned, both from reading about old illustrators, but also some of the new discoveries of neuroscience and visual perception, which has really changed our understanding of like how we look at pictures. I realized a lot of the stuff that they teach in art school is just plain old dogma. It's just wrong. Like the idea that you're in some of the old composition books, they would say, oh, your eye moves in a spiral around the composition and you don't want your eye to leave the picture. So you've got to control the eye. Well, in reality, if you look at eye tracking data, eyes don't follow any kind of exact route. Everyone looks at pictures differently. And a lot of the way we look at pictures is influenced by the title of the picture, which is a part of the composition, it seems to me. And by whatever is psychologically salient, like a face, you'll go right to the face and ignore everything else. So a lot of the stuff in the old art instruction books is just plain wrong. A lot of stuff they were teaching in art schools is wrong then, and it's wrong now because people still teach this stuff. So I was just trying to figure this out for myself, putting it out there on the blog. And then if I was wrong, I would know from the comments that I was either confusing or boring or off topic or whatever. I could tell if it was a good approach or not. So then I took all that content. I said, oh, this will be easy to make a book. I'll just take this blog and turn it into a book. Well, what it meant was I really had to delete a lot of stuff.
Right.
And the writing process for Color and Light and Imaginative Realism was mainly honing it down as much as possible to just the essential stuff. Because artists, none of us really want to read more than we have to.
Right.
Right?
Right. Pictures, as many pictures as possible.
Make the pictures 3/4 of the spreads.
Yeah.
That goes also for, I think, a storybook like Dinotopia. It's much easier to write a page of text than it is to do a picture, I think. And people do, so they write a lot of stuff. But they really, I wanted to just cut it down as much as possible and just make as little writing as I could get away with. My hero, of course, would be Rien Poortvliet, the Dutch illustrator who did gnomes and
Yeah. He did
That's great.
an incredible book because I had only really known about the gnome stuff. And then a neighbor of mine was like, oh, we have this cool art book you might like if you like this artist. And he did like, it was almost like a genealogy book
Yeah.
of his ancestors back through time all the way to like cavemen,
Yeah.
essentially. Have you seen that one?
Yeah, I think I have most of his books by now. And
Okay.
he started out with gnomes. He had some written notes and captions. He did a book called Secrets of the Gnomes. That's kind of a narrative through line. But most of his books are impressions. It's kind of a stream of consciousness, a visual stream of consciousness thing.
Yeah.
Fairies is another book that was really a great visual book
Yeah.
that Brian Froud and Alan Lee did. They later went on as designers for Peter Jackson on Lord of the Rings.
Right. That's
But
right.
but their fairies book is really wonderful. It takes a different look at fairies than the kind of sweet, happy fairies that you'd see in a lot of the British stuff later. But those books are strange books because they're picture books, but they're not really for young children necessarily. And when I did these paintings in my spare time, now again, this goes back to this idea: have an experimental 10% of your time that you do for just fun stuff that you want to do just to please yourself. Don't worry about the commercial application.
No
So I did
strings
these.
attached. Just yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I just started doing, while I was working for National Geographic, I did Waterfall City, which is a big panoramic scene of a waterfall painting. And then I did Dinosaur Parade, which is a scene of people and dinosaurs marching through the streets of a Roman-style city.
Which was the cover for
It was a cover for Dinotopia, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't do it as a cover. I did it as just a painting.
Right.
With no idea that this would be part of a world. And then I started thinking, well, I wonder if I could tie these together with some kind of narrative. Maybe like Robert Ballard, the guy who found the Titanic. Maybe he discovers the ruins of a civilization under the ocean. But then I thought, well, where would it be though? Wouldn't satellites spot this thing? So I set it in the 1860s just to take it away from our time. And little by little, I started coming up with this idea for a world where people and dinosaurs interact, but not scary dinosaur monsters, but more intelligent dinosaurs. And this was right at the time when we were rethinking our ideas about dinosaurs to allow for them being nurturing parents and social interaction and group dynamics. So it's a
This is
different,
like late 80s.
Yeah.
Early. Yeah.
yeah. So it was based on a lot of the new science. I really got into dinosaurs at that point, like late 80s, early 90s, because it was a revolution in thinking about them. They were no longer seen as the cold-blooded evolutionary failures that lived in swamps, but instead dynamic, intelligent creatures that were warm-blooded and more like birds, even feathers, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I remember, I mean, I was a kid at that time. So I was eating that stuff up where like you had Bill Watterson doing dinosaurs and Calvin and Hobbes. You had Jurassic Park, which came out a few years later, the book, and then the movie. You had Dinotopia. You had the Zoo books. Do you remember Zoo books?
Oh, sure. I got some of those with the Sibbick illustration, John Sibbick.
Yeah.
They were great.
Yeah, and that was like, there was the dinosaur one. I actually tore that thing apart from flipping through it so many times, like looking at it. So you start doing these illustrations, and then what was it that was like that? Like, when did it go from, oh, this is my 10% thing to I'm actually going in on this? And I'm gonna make Dinotopia.
Maybe I can riff off one of the questions I think that came through your community, which is, what do you do first, the writing or the art or the storyboard?
Yeah.
The approach I took was definite and all the same in all the books. Start with a written outline. So I start with the writing, kind of come up with a basic idea of the story. A father and a son are shipwrecked on this island, and they explore it and go from one place to another, and they meet Lee Crab and they meet these various people. And so this runs on for like 10 pages, but not too long, but just an essential kind of 3-act structure, more or less. Okay, then I do a full-on storyboard. I printed out little panels, the proportions of the page, just Greeked in the text for how much text I thought I might need to get across the various points, and then figured out what visual I would want for that page spread. Then I did the artwork from start to finish sequentially through the book. And a lot of ideas come when you do sequential artwork as separate paintings or illustrations. So then I was taking notes based on those new ideas. But then the very last thing I delivered to the publisher, and this made the publishers very nervous, was the final text. Because, most most children's book publishers expect to see the manuscript first, then the illustrations. But if you're visually driven and visually inspired, like I was, you kind of need to work it out visually first. And then the writing went pretty fast. I wanted the writing to cover the points that I couldn't cover in the pictures. So things like, the sounds, the smells, the texture, the feel, the conversation, the dialogue.
Yeah.
And and then to choose moments in the story to illustrate that were somehow would lead the viewer onto their own path of exploration, because you're collaborating with the reader, really, with their imagination.
That's incredible. And then I know, so the book, so that process then to do the book, what are we looking at? Was that a year, a couple years?
Couple years, 3 years. Because I showed this, my mentor was Ian Ballantyne, the founder of Ballantyne Books and Bantam Books. And his wife, Betty Ballantyne, was the editor. And they were like freelancers in their 70s after a whole career in publishing. And boy, he really knew publishing. This is back before the internet days. So he was sending out newsletters to all his contacts in the publishing industry. But he saw these large panoramic scenes, he said, and I told him this basic idea for Dinotopia, and he said, there's a book here, but it has to have scope. I said, what do you mean by scope? He says, it's got to be at least 160 pages long, fully illustrated. I said, 160? That means I'm going to have to do that many paintings, I'm going to have to take 2 years, 3 years off. And I mean, calling up all my clients and saying, I'm working on this dinosaur project. And at the time, in 89, dinosaurs weren't that popular. It wasn't, like you say, until the early 90s that they kind of got going again.
Right.
Barney and all the other stuff, Jurassic Park. So I just funded this crazy idea by selling a few paintings in a gallery of these Dinotopia pictures and selling prints. We did some prints. And
you worked with the Greenwich Workshop?
Yeah.
Or you still do?
I don't know if they even exist anymore, but yeah, I sold some prints with them. And so that kept me afloat while I did this idea. And we chose a publisher. We had a few different publishers that wanted to do it, but it was Turner Publishing that ended up publishing the book. And they were great because it was a boutique publisher from Ted Turner, and they put all their horsepower behind this completely unknown author, which I was.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd written Artist's Guide to Sketching, but that was not a fictional book.
Right.
So so they really got behind, and the book did very well, and went to like 18 different languages in 30 countries. And
so I have a quick question. So,
Yeah.
so during the process of that, it's actually good that you bring that up. So there's always this moment where, especially as we go into, Jake, Will, and I have done a bunch of self-publishing, but the projects are getting bigger, and you have to just sort of go all in and say, I hope this is going to work. The feedback that you had at the publisher when they saw your paintings and then just the initial pitch, they had to be were they all in, like, oh my gosh, this is going to be amazing? Or was there some doubt because if everybody's saying, hey, this is a great job, we're going to publish it, that gives you the motivation. But was there any doubt there, or were they all in?
Well, they were enthusiastic, but we had our own doubts about it, knowing that it's tough to do it something that doesn't have a category in publishing, like a picture book for older readers. If you think about it, I heard this from a lot of librarians that we showed the book to, or that embraced the book. They said there aren't enough visual books for older readers. I mean, there's graphic novels, of course, and that's great, but but there aren't really that many picture books for older readers. So that means you got to put it in with juvenile fiction. The problem with children's book publishing as an industry, I think, is that it tends to age segment the audience too much. Where I think the books I liked as a kid, like Mark Twain's Tom Sawyer or Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson, those books were not for a certain aged sector. They were for all ages, for all kinds of people. And that's why they're great, I think. And I think the kind of book we wanted to make was one like that would be embraced. And has been embraced by a lot of different people. But that means you have to go into publishers and wave your hands around and say, this is for all kinds of readers. And they look at you very doubtfully when you say that.
Where in the bookstore do we put this?
Exactly.
Now looking back on it, and you don't have to give us exact numbers or anything, but how many editions and reprints have sold for Dinotopia? I mean, it's got to be a huge seller. I mean, at least from my impression of it.
It's still in print. There are 4 books that I did that are still in print. And that in itself is a good thing. Sold millions of copies.
Wow.
But it's been through. It was first with Turner, but that went into turnaround when the Time Warner merger happened. So we got the rights back, and we brought it to HarperCollins. But the problem with HarperCollins was that they were also basically it was a children's book part of the publisher, and they couldn't really see it as a book for all ages. So we ended up with Dover, which still publishes it now. And they're great. They're a long tail publisher, meaning that they publish a small number of books with like 6,000 titles in print. Most publishers, as you know, if you've worked with traditional publishers, will have you in print for a while. But once it gets below a certain amount, they'll drop a title.
Yeah.
So
it's not worth it.
So I feel lucky that the books are now with Dover. Because Dover was always the publisher that I liked because they, they publish all the art instruction books from the Harold Speed and Solomon and things like that.
So you must have been early 30s when Dinotopia, when you were working on it?
Yeah, 32, something like that, yeah.
I'm curious if you were born in the 70s or the 80s and you're now in your 30s at this time, or maybe you're born in the 90s and you were to do this again, would it be I'm just going to go find a publisher, or would you have crowdfunded Dinotopia?
I can see an argument for either way. And I know you guys have crowdfunded and self-published your own games and stuff, right?
Your books, games, tarot decks, stuff like that. Yeah.
And my friend Bill Stout was doing that even before the age of the internet with his sketchbooks that he sold at cons, which seemed really smart to me. But, and I thought about this with my latest book, books I've been working on. Should I self-publish and go Kickstarter and that kind of thing? Or should I go with a publisher? The good thing about a publisher is that because of the unique economics of bookstores, and the return policy that they have, where they can have a book on the shelf and then send it back. Yeah. It's really impossible to get into bookstores if you're self-publishing. And there is a glut of self-published books and vanity books out there that you're competing with. But at the same time, when you work with a regular publisher, they can handle all the logistics of the printing and publishing and the the mechanics of getting the imports and dealing with tariffs and all that kind of stuff. And I really appreciate that because, as an artist, you only have so many hours in the day, and I don't want to be worrying about, bills of lading and that kind of thing when I'd rather be doing a picture.
That's Will's life right now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a balancing act. There's always pros and cons. And that's one of the tough things is that you become a store, essentially. At some point, you got to ship the stuff. That's what Will's doing all day. You got to store it. You got to deal with the import. So yeah, it's tough.
One of the things that I realized too is that in order to sell something, you have to give a lot of stuff away first. That's something Ian Ballantyne said. You got to give away a lot of stuff in order to sell it. And which means that, this within the age of social media and the internet, it's okay to sell something and to give it away at the same time, at least in a different form. I think Proco told me that. He said, well, our best selling, this is back when he was doing DVDs, our best-selling DVD is one that where all the content was available for free online, but people wanted it all in one place.
Yeah.
Right.
That's incredible. So you're in your 60s now?
Yeah.
I wanted to go back to that question I emailed you, and that is, how have you approached art? We talked about your 20s, which was a lot of experimentation and learning. Sounds like your 30s is where you really started to, as the common term now, started to cook, and you're working for clients and you're coming out with Dinotopia. What were your 40s and 50s like and if you have any other insight on 20s and 30s, I'm really curious what art creation is like over a lifespan.
Well, the big picture, I think, kind of changes in my career is that overall, I've worked for clients either as, the background painter or a freelance illustrator, or working with a publisher for a book that I wrote and illustrated. And then once the internet came along and YouTube came along, I was able to do YouTube videos and produce those. So that became its own thing and demands a lot of time and attention, but I love doing it. But more and more, and this is why if I was to be born anytime, I'd want to be born now or emerging now, because there's so many ways that you can distribute your own products, so many choices you can make, so many ways you can reach people or develop a following. One of the founders of Wired magazine, I think his name is Ken Kelly, said, all you need is 1,000 true fans. What he means by a true fan is someone who's willing to spend maybe over a year, like $100 on your stuff. If you have 1,000 true fans, you can make a living. So you don't need a huge following. You just need high quality followers who are committed to what you're doing. So you can carve out all kinds of different niches. You can make stuff for, to sell on, what are the sites that you use to sell art prints?
Like Society 6 or something.
Yeah. You could do that. You can work. You can still get jobs from a traditional illustration art director. You can self-publish. You can make videos. You can make a living as a YouTube influencer. And there's a lot of, if you ask 7-year-olds what career do you want to get into, they usually say, I want to make YouTube video. I want to be a YouTuber. So that's another pathway. But it is tough. It's competitive, and we're facing some big changes, I think, in our society and in our technology with AI. If you want to get into that, I don't know if you do or not, but those are things that we all have to adapt to. And I think one mistake I think a lot of young artists make when they see someone like me is they go, oh, well, you're all established, you're all set up. But the truth is that for me and for anyone else who's been in this business as long as I have, you have to reinvent yourself at least 3 or 4 times throughout your career. Maybe you guys have done this too, where all the clients you used to have are gone in a given sector. And so you have to go, oh God, I got to hit the pavement again with a new portfolio.
Yeah.
Well, I think the clients change, the industry changed, but also you change. And so, it might be a different market or a different thing,
Yeah. The old saying, no man steps into the same river twice, because the river's changed and the man's changed.
I like that.
And I'm in the process of this reinvention right now as well. There was Animation Jake for 12 years. Then there was, I would say, YouTube and Kickstarter Jake for another dozen years. And now this next phase is sort of, and there was also like the children's book version. Yeah, and this next phase is like graphic novel Jake, So
yeah,
it's really, really interesting. So we were joking before you got on that all you paint now is like parking lots and gas stations, right? But what's funny about that is it goes right back to the art or the artist guide to sketching. And I feel like you've come full circle, but this time you're bringing a lifetime's worth of like skill to the parking lot painting, which, I was joking. I'm like, he's ascended above us mortals where he can find an illustration and beauty in a sunset over a parking lot. He doesn't need to draw dinosaurs anymore. He
just goes to the Safeway and like
it's right there. Well, a lot of those parking lot paintings came from when my wife was shopping for 45 minutes in the Hannaford supermarket. I had 45 minutes to do a painting, a whole painting, and then be ready to pick her up at the end. So,
That's genius.
So the thing is that I feel like there's a whole world out there that artists don't paint. If you look through Plein Air Painting magazine or any kind of websites for plein air, it's always the same kind of, Tuscan hill towns and fishing boats in the harbor and forest edge and stuff like that. And it's just the same motifs. You don't ever see a car, but cars are all around us in our world.
Yeah.
Or just ordinary appliances or what you see in your kitchen of your home. So we've had some art challenges on Facebook where, you do a farmer's market or do a gas station or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's all kinds of artistic possibilities to those things, not only in literally documenting them, but connecting them with your imagination. And I think that for me, the core of the real fun is when you connect imagination and observation, which is surprisingly rare. Usually artists either work totally out of their heads or totally literally from what they look at. But to me, I get really excited. Like we did this thing at Lightbox Expo for 2 or 3 years in a row now called Colossal Characters. And the idea is you bring along a little action figure or figurine. I brought like Super Mario. And you place them in the scene. So the scene has to be accurate, but you got to paint that guy as if he's there. But if you have if like me, I'm the kind of person, I like to look at something to fire up my imagination.
Yeah.
I looked at this little guy and I said, okay, I'll put him right in the scene like this. But Aaron Blaze, who's the animator, he did a great one. He had the new, what's that called? That tablet app for animation.
Oh, Procreate?
Yeah, Procreate Dreams. That's it.
Yeah.
So he was showing a bunch of students. He's a great teacher, showing students how to do Procreate Dreams. So he had this giant stepping over this building in Pasadena in like about, 20 frames or so. And he did an animation sequence. So you can do a painting or an animation sequence or a drawing, and people did everything. It's a good icebreaker event for an expo like that.
Yeah. That's you've been doing Lightbox and CTN over the years. Is there any other expo that you go to or convention like that you do? I've
done them all. And it's funny because I'm on the fringes of a lot of different societies or groups. One of them is the American Society of Architectural Illustrators. These are guys who do renderings, both digital and traditional media, of buildings that have not yet been built. So their imaginations are really good, but they're also really good sketchers. So I went to one of their gatherings. I went to a group of medical illustrators who do diagrams of dissections, and they're an interesting group. Wow. And then the Plein Air Society, and I was with a maritime group and an aviation group. So all these different groups of artists that a lot of art students don't even know about are out there. Where they Guild of Natural Science Illustrators is another really great group because they do birds and butterflies, and it's like a meeting of science and art. Really exciting stuff. But I'm not a member of any of these.
That's so funny. I wouldn't even have thought that, but I guess your National Geographic experience kind of exposed you to all those worlds.
I guess so. They somehow found me on the internet too. We'll be going in May. We'll be going to the National Portrait Society of America in Washington. And that's a really great gathering if you want to watch people paint heads, because some of the best people get together, Jeff Hine and Kwang Ho and other people like that, Mary White, will do demos that'll just blow your mind. They're so good.
That is the portrait painting is like, that's one of those things where, and I've been drawing my whole life, and I'm just like, how can you do that so well and like understand a person's face so well that you could just knock it out in a few strokes? Like
I can't believe people can do it.
Yeah.
I mean, they all worship Sargent and I do too. But I think they're the real good ones, like Rose Franson. She painted everyone in her whole town in Wisconsin or Minnesota.
Really?
Yeah. Wow. And she's really fast and really confident, and you have to just get there and just go for the essentials. But one thing that some of them do, which I really agree with, let's see. Well, anyway, is to have the model talking back to you instead of holding real still, because a lot of art schools have people just sitting dead still. But the truth is that these artists of the past, I know this from reading about them, like Sargent would have models he was talking to and playing music for, playing piano, playing violin, to keep them animated, because your face changes a lot when you're talking compared to just when you're holding still.
And they're capturing like the soul of the person and not just the visual.
Right.
Right.
And how much do you caricature? These are all the questions that people talk about at this gathering, but that's just one gathering of artists.
Yeah. So you're East Coast, West Coast. Are you just traveling all the time?
Not all the time, no, because I got to be here to work on stuff. But we're going out soon to visit Pixar and visit San Jose State, which is a really good art school, and doing an event in Carmel for the Artist Guide to Sketching. It's actually at a Thomas Kincaid Gallery. I've never done an event there before, so it should be interesting.
Yeah. Who coordinates all that for you?
I do, and along with the publicist at the publisher, but mainly me. I mean, that's the thing. Even when you work with a big publisher, you pretty much, the author is up to you, unless you're a real lead title or something. It's up to you to do the publicity.
Do you draw while you're doing those events, or is it a book signing, or what kind of event is it?
I try to. If I got some downtime, I love to sketch. Like at Portrait Society, I said, instead of giving a formal presentation, I'll just be off to the side sketching. So I did that before. I did a series of articles for International Artist magazine, and one of the articles I wrote for them was kind of a sketch journalist report on the Portrait Society gathering. Sketch journalism is something that I think Urban Sketchers is bringing back, because it was founded by Gabby Campanario, who was a guy who worked as a sketch journalist for a newspaper. And he founded this group of artists where they kind of take a journalist's approach to drawing. You go on location with a group of people, or you could go alone, but you draw like courtroom art, or you draw street scenes to capture the essence of a place. And it should be truthful. You could work on it a little bit at home, but not based on photos necessarily, but from observation. It's a good group too.
A couple episodes we talked about our like spouses and how we've been able, essentially they've been a key to our success, and how spouses, the spouse artist relationship works. And I'm curious, I know your wife is an artist as well.
Yeah,
Jeanette, but I'm curious about that relationship, how that's evolved over the years and how that works.
Yeah, she was just an art school sketching buddy when I was at Art Center. And we were sketching buddies for like 3 years before we got more serious. But I liked her because she was willing to go outside. Like when we had an assignment from our perspective class to do a train yard, but everybody went to look at photo reference for that. And then we said, let's go to the train yard. So we went there, and we both sat up and did sketches and went out to a restaurant afterwards. But she's still my sketching buddy, and she kind of got me into watercolor, actually. So I have to blame her for that. But no, she's also my toughest critic. And I'm sure you guys talked about this too when you talked about spouses. The one thing I really want her to do is be totally honest with whatever her reaction is to a picture, if it works or it doesn't work. And, we razz each other, and we encourage each other, but we're both different personalities, but and different styles of drawing and painting. But both being artists makes it easier. We can talk about gradations or talk about saturation or whatever. It would be hard if you weren't married to an artist.
Yeah.
Do you ever hide, like keep something from her because you're not ready for the honest critique yet? Like you need to sit with it a little while before you can.
Yeah, and that goes for the writing too. I usually let her read a draft if it's an important piece. And if it's not ready to show her yet, I don't show it to her yet.
How about if you guys are
later?
How about if you guys have friction? Do you ask her what she thinks of your art then?
You mean friction about the work, about the artwork?
No, just day-to-day friction about, not closing, putting the toilet seat down or something. And
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, no, whenever there's artwork involved, she's always glad to look at it and give me feedback. I think it's also good to get feedback from non-artists. Like an example was I did this painting for National Geographic of a grandfather and his grandson in the attic, next to the attic window, looking at back issues of the magazine, which they did for their centennial event. And I showed it to my contractor because we were getting our house worked on. He said, it's nice, but you got the framing all wrong on that window. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you're going to put in those headers differently. And he told me how it was wrong. And I don't think if I showed it to anyone else, I would have gotten that kind of feedback. So
Yeah.
Rockwell did this too. He would always invite anyone who was going by the house, he'd have them in the studio to look at his picture. And whatever they said about it, he would factor into how he rethought about it.
Right, because essentially art is for everyone, not just for artists.
Yes.
Right. Like,
Yeah. I could take some notes from that. Yesterday I had a critique. I've been painting some different experiments in watercolor, and somebody was super critical about one of the boat sketches I did, and so instead of acknowledging it, I just blocked them.
Oh, okay, yeah. I went to the Lowell's Boat Shop to do a painting one time. This is a place where they build old wooden boats in the old style. They're building a big, like a whaling boat for one of the Mystic Seaport ships. And the owner of the Lowell's Boat Shop came by, and he was a guy who didn't say much, but he said, "You got the shear line right on that?" The shear line is the line of the top of the deck. Man, that's the nicest compliment he could have given me.
you just bask in that.
I
glow of
love that. Thank
compliment.
you.
hey, James, so it seems to me like the young up and coming artists today they're bombarded with, Instagram images and having to try to put stuff out for that. And it seems like kids today are being raised more inside the house, and you like going out and jumping on the trains and like basically forcing an adventure. How important do you think experiences are to inform your art, to you know what I mean, to make images?
That's a really interesting question, I think. And it's one that I think a lot of young artists, as you say, are facing, is that you're raised in this stew or this bath of media and movies and social media posts. And how do you make your own life of art out of all that stuff? And what do you draw from your own personal life? I think we more and more now, we need to go outside and reach our own conclusions about what's around us, interpret the world around us, everything, not just your favorite thing to draw, like animals or people, whatever it is, but draw trees if you're not used to it, or draw signs, learn about letter forms. And because, I mean, now you can't even really trust the images you get from Google, because half of them, like if I was searching, what was it? Something like a tuna fish jumping out of the water, and it was all AI generated. And I thought I could tell just by glancing at it, it was all AI.
Yeah.
So if there were any photos, they don't exist anymore. I still have my old photo reference file from the 80s, which I made by tearing up old National Geographics and old nature magazines. But those photos are becoming more rare because they're true photographs.
Yeah. I was saying, I think it was last year, I said, media from before 2022 is going to be highly sought after, because you'll know none of it is artificial.
Yes.
Videos, books, photographs, all that stuff. And I'm a big fan of like cobbling together a album of reference physically or on your hard drive or whatever of that kind of stuff. So you don't have to rely on an internet that might be up and running or not up and running. You don't have to rely on AI and whatnot. That leads me to ask you, like, how big is your reference library?
Well, I have a lot of art books and a lot of picture books on plants and stuff, and, and about a vertical 6-foot filing cabinet. Not a huge morgue, but it's curated, and it's got a lot of images. I also have a lot of sketchbooks, and I refer to those more and more. Sketches are great sources of inspiration. That's one of the reasons I like to keep as much as possible my plein air stuff, because I refer to that and it's really useful. Most artists in the past, like Hudson River School painters or Golden Agers, when they would paint outdoors, they would do it not to sell as a plein air gallery piece, but as something to refer to use as a source material. And it's amazing how useful that really is.
I have a friend of mine who was visiting with Mike Mignola, right?
Yeah.
And they were looking through sketches, his sketchbooks and whatnot. And he just had sketchbook after sketchbook piled on top of each other of all kinds of different things. You know, if anything piqued his interest, he'd do sketches of it and just fill a few pages of it. And she was asking, you know, how he used sketchbooks or why he sketched so much. And he said, well, when I go to sit down and draw my comics, I don't pull up reference books. I don't pull up photographs. I go to my sketchbooks and I use that as the reference. And it's like a filter of a filter of a filter when you do that, because you're essentially constructing those things through your perception and through your memory of them. And you create something almost entirely new and unique when you're basing it off of a sketch of something that you did in the past. So
yeah, absolutely. Well said. My mentor for the National Geographic work was an illustrator named Tom Lovell, who worked in the slicks back in the 40s and 50s. And then he worked for National Geographic in the 70s. And I met him in the, I guess, late 80s. But
wait, did you call them the slicks?
The slicks, like the story magazines, like Ladies Home Journal. And
gotcha.
Yeah.
That's like such an old school term.
I guess it is, yeah.
Wait, what's that?
Yeah, anyway, there's the story magazines, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
The women's magazines, they called them too. Anyway, he and Harry Anderson were two of the greats for those markets before television basically killed off the story magazines. But he said what he liked to do when he did the story on the Vikings, for example, for the National Geographic, was he'd go on location, talk to experts, sketch everything he saw in the museums, and then not based it so much on photos, but on his sketches. Then if he had a horse, he built a little maquette of a horse's head, a little sculpt, and he'd hold it up at the right angle and draw that. And I tried to follow that path. So I did shoot some photo reference, but mainly I was just doing charcoal studies. Take a pose in the mirror of whatever pose, you know, you could as an artist, you can just pose in a costume and take the characterization and then draw yourself in the mirror and then use that in the picture. It really works well. So I did a lot of stuff based on mirror studies.
That's cool. Well, we should probably wrap it up. Will and Lee, did you have anything else you wanted to?
I don't want to open too big of a can of worms, but I'm curious because your career has been so successful and long. The invention of AI is just such an extreme. I mean, I know technology changes. When Photoshop came, it was different than traditional drawing and painting, but essentially the same. If you're a bad drawer in real life, you're going to be bad at painting in Photoshop too, and vice versa. But AI is different. It just seems like a whole different level. So, you know, without opening too big of a can of worms, what is your take on AI?
Wow, it is a big can of worms, and I don't want to gloss over it too quickly because it's seriously affecting a lot of people's careers even now. I think most people are focused on this idea that AI is somehow stealing from us, or is somehow being trained on copyrighted works, or that it's threatening our jobs. Those are all real concerns. The first of those, that it's stealing from our works, doesn't bother me at all. I'd rather, I don't mind that. I would even be willing to give someone who's training an AI model a folder of my stuff and say, go ahead. I don't care if you do that, because I know I can always do stuff that goes beyond what AI can do. Even if AI gets better and better, I really think it lacks something. It's part of what makes it identifiable as AI.
Well, I want to interject something right there.
Yeah.
I saw a video that pointed out no matter how this guy prompted it, no matter what word he put into it, the AI could not make an image of an overflowing glass of wine. It just couldn't do it. It would have the wine like dripping out the sides. It would have the wine dripping out the bottom, but the glass would always be at least half full. And he said it's because there's not a single image of an overflowing glass of wine that it's been trained on, that it's been able to like base it off of.
And what the public really craves is that unique perspective that a human individual has, an artist has. And that's what we can deliver. I think the big split is between traditional, meaning physical paint, hand-drawn with a pencil or a brush, and digital. Because digital has been moving toward AI for a long time, autonomously generating images. Long before AI, you had, what do you call it, photo bashing, and you had 3D models, and all this kind of stuff that you can do. Some of the particle generation and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it was almost to AI. Now AI you're giving away this kind of God-given thing that we wanted to do in our retirement or in our spare time, if you're a non-artist, or the thing that we love doing most as artists is to generate images, right?
Yeah.
So I think the problem with AI is not just the first two issues that I brought up that are concerning people, but that it makes us weaker, makes our imaginations weaker. And
I agree with that.
the other thing I think that people are missing about AI is that it's not just how it affects the creators, because we were assuming that you have these special creators who generate images, and you have people who look at images. But as AI gets its way through the society, you have AI-enabled sub-creators, if you want to call them that, which is ordinary people who can make images, who the leading image creators or world builders will enlist the help of some of these people to help them develop their world. I think if they're smart, they'll do that. So in other words, AI will influence the market more in the bottom 80% than the top 20 or 10% by changing our relationship with our fans. They're no longer just passively watching what we do, our videos, or looking at our images, but they're co-creating with us, perhaps through some AI enablement that allows them to do things that ordinary fans couldn't do before. So I don't really know how that'll take shape. We also don't really know how the public will accept AI in the long run, because there's a lot of resistance to it right now. And as AI gets used more in surveillance and mind control and who knows what, science fiction scenarios, there could be a very strong rejection of not just AI, but just computer life in general, and a return to handmade. That's what I'm banking on. Is that
I'm so glad to hear you say that, because I went all in on the traditional as well. Same reason.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many people tell me I'm throwing away my computer's Cintiq and I'm going back to my sketchbook because I want to just reconnect with people, reconnect with my skills if I have any, build my skills. And if you video yourself making something by hand, AI can definitely never touch you doing that.
Right. Right. Well, James, this has been delightful. Thank you for taking time out of your morning to talk
Good
with us.
questions.
Yeah. What do you want people to, is there anything you want to tell people or leave people with about your book or your YouTube channel or where you're active online? I know you have a pretty active Substack too.
Yes,
nice.
I've sort of switched from blogging to Substack because Substack has the same spirit as blogging did, like 2010. The comments are all from real people. They're all really interesting. It's a good feedback. Anyway, so I do Substack, YouTube, and books. I'm back into books. I'll be doing a book on gouache painting next. Once I get out from under this one, Artist Guide to Sketching is taking off faster than I expected.
Cool.
So we've like shipped 1,000 orders and got another 500 to go.
Wow.
Something like that.
Ooh, that's awesome.
So it's a lot of work, and I'm doing a lot of book signing, and my son and his fiance are helping out, and it's going well. But the book is really getting a stronger response than I expected. There's also going to be a documentary on Tom Kincaid coming out in a month that was made by an editor who worked on the Anthony Bourdain and Mr. Rogers. It's more about his kind of his rise and fall after he started his company. So they wanted me to be part of it, and I said, nah. there's no video and there's no photos even really much of me and Tom. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how you'd cover that in the documentary. And
Mm.
besides, I think his story really starts, the story you want to tell starts when he starts his print company. So anyway,
Yeah.
I'm not part of that, but it should be an interesting one when it comes out. So keep an eye out for that.
Well, what we actually need is a movie, a biopic on you and him doing the train ride across country. That's the movie I want to see.
That's the story everybody seems interested in right now.
Yeah.
I hear that from a lot of people, because the story of dropping out of art school and taking a risk, and kind of Motorcycle Diaries, if you saw that, is similar in the sense that you have two guys whose lives go in parallel for a while, and then they head off in different directions.
Yeah,
And,
there's a lot of potential. If not, it needs to be a graphic novel. I think that would be good.
Okay.
I'll draw it.
All right. Sounds good.
So check out your YouTube, check out your Substack, and check out the new book. And we'll have links to all that in the show notes for
Thank you.
everybody. All right. Thanks, James.
Thank you
We'll
very
see
much.
Thank you
later.
so
guys.
much.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
All right. That was James Gurney. What did you guys think of that? What was your big takeaway from talking to the man for over an hour here?
Well,
It's
he's
just cool. Oh, go ahead, Will.
I was gonna say he's probably, in my opinion, like top 10 living illustrators right today.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say? I mean,
Yeah.
like as far as like his notoriety and his body of work, and
I don't think you could talk to a person today other than him. Maybe I'll have to think that, who embodies the spirit of like the illustration masters from like the late 19th century, early 20th century up through Rockwell.
Yeah.
I feel like he is the last of that kind.
yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
I mean, he's a true artist, really. I mean, he's had a storied career. He's changed when he needed to. He's evolved when he needed to.
Yeah,
So it's really neat to see somebody who's still doing it. He's not just like talking about that sketching trip, he's not just talking about the old days. He has the
Right.
new days too, and he's got
Right.
everything in between. So it's really neat to see that play out. And he seems like he's got a genuine curiosity and interest in life. And that is what the artist sort of spirit is about, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Right. And at an age where you'd probably be checking out and being like, I'm retired. I only do art part-time. Like he's shipping out books, right? He's working on a new book to follow that one up. He's running across the country to do lectures and like in-person events and stuff like that. And the dude still draws and paints every day as well.
He's energetic. I mean,
Yeah.
he's got it going on. I hope in 40 years when I'm that age that
Yeah.
I'm
Yep.
40
like that.
years.
I mean, I'm only 20. So
Right.
You know, one of the takeaways that I had was I was listening to him talk about early on in the interview when we were talking about failing and not failing.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized, like, because one of the things that I've always taught is that you need to fail often and hard and a lot. And then what I realized listening to him he mentioned that he came from an engineering family.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's just different styles of learning.
Yeah.
And I think that I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, I think what he was saying when he was talking about doing little different tests, images and little tests on learning how to paint,
Mm-hmm.
I think he was saying fail really quickly. Like he was
and
saying don't fail.
small.
But yeah, he was saying fail small and fast with a lot, but he didn't say it that way. He said, you don't need to fail. But I think that like his method is more calculated than mine. Mine is more of a bull in a china shop of just like, all right, let's just go in there and try to see if it didn't work. Boom, throw that away. And his is more calculated. And I think that they're different people and different learning styles. And that was an interesting thing to think of. Like when I teach, is not everyone is going to be the same, and they're not going to respond to the same advice the same way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my big thing too was this is a guy who not once has waited around for permission to do something.
Yeah.
He got an idea for it and he's like, well, what's stopping me? Let's just go do it. From from going to art school to dropping out of art school to joining the animation studio,
Right.
not knowing how to paint, just walking. I love the mustache story where it comes in the next day.
That is a crazy story.
Yeah, every moment in his career has just been like, oh, here's an idea, let's go for it. Like nothing's gonna stop this from happening, and I think that that's a huge takeaway for me, that just to remind me, like, don't give up and have the guts to do stuff.
I mean, he did that before anybody was doing that. I mean, if you think about how groundbreaking Dinotopia is, there was nothing like that. I mean,
Right.
not only the content, but also the format. Like he's saying, the librarians didn't know where to put it. That just speaks to sort of him being ahead of the game, ahead of the curve.
I don't know how many times I've talked to illustrators and they're like, I'm working on a book. I'm like, what's your book like? And they're like, well, it's like Dinotopia, but it's going to be, instead of dinosaurs, it's going to be, goats or something. And Goatopia, that'd be interesting. Anyway, yeah, he's hugely influential. So it was such a treat to talk to him today. Go check out the things we talked about. His YouTube channel is just a wealth of information, 500,000 subscribers there. His Substack is incredible. Every post is just a wealth of information, and then get his books, because he distills all of that stuff into like its purest form in the books. So so go check that out, and I'll take us out. 3-Point Perspective is brought to you by SVSLEARN, where becoming a great illustrator starts. And your hosts are Will Terry, Lee White, and Jake Parker today. We just want to give a shout out to our SVS team that helps make all this happen. Our podcast producer, Daniel Tu, team manager, Preston Smith, keeper of the curriculum, Austin Shirtliff, show notes wrangler, Lily Howell, chief operations officer, Lisa Fott, and our illustrator, Annalise Black. Now, go draw something.